Welcome, everybody. My name is Jessica Hamlin. I am the Shumla Archaeological Research and Education Center Executive Director. And today I'm going to be presenting on the second of two introductory lunch and learns. This is February 2025. I am going to share my screen with you. So happy to have you all here. And for those of you who are new, a special welcome to you. We are so excited when we have folks learning about us and getting interested in what we're doing. Okay, thumbs up, can y'all see my screen? Awesome, okay. Well, here we go. So today we are going to talk about preserving the oldest known books in North America. Before we dive in, for those of you who are new, I want to work on a little bit of what we call the rock art eyes. So in this image, which is a very, very small section of Panther Cave within Seminole Canyon State Park, I want you to look at this tall figure, which is an anthropomorph, what we call an anthropomorph, which means human-like figure. And you can see the body of the figure is very long. There are arms outstretched to either side that lift up to the hands here. The head is turned to the side, and you can see the mouth right here. A long body coming down to legs right here. You also see that there are elbow adornments, things that are hanging from the elbows of this figure, and the figure is holding things. Are y'all starting to see some of that art? There's also a really incredible kind of crenellated figure here in the bottom. This is something we call an enigmatic, because it is neither a human-like figure, anthropomorph, or an animal-like figure, zoomorph. And so we are going to dive into this beautiful, beautiful rock art. And the first thing I want to share is that we at Shumla, for the last 27 years, we were founded in 1998, we have been working to preserve and share the rock art panels of the Lower Pecos Canyonlands and the information that they hold. And in January, in my first introduction, I gave kind of a background to the five rock art styles that there are in the Lower Pecos Canyonlands. There's the historic period art, the red monochrome style, the Pecos River style, the bold line geometric style, and the red linear style. If you're interested to learn about those styles, that is on our YouTube channel, which I'll show you at the end of this presentation, so you can watch the first half of this introduction. Today, I'm going to give kind of a brief introduction about why we call these panels books, why they're endangered, and what Shumla is doing to preserve them. So I'm going to recenter us into the Lower Pecos Canyonlands. Some of you may have never been to this place or have known about this place. We are right here on the border of Mexico and Texas, where the Rio Grande River meets the Lower Pecos, the lower part of the Pecos, and the Devil's River. It's a little bit west of Del Rio. And so I put a few of the cities of Texas here to help you get a sense of where we're talking about. But this is really along these major rivers and tributaries of the Pecos, the Devils, and the Rio Grande. This region is the ancestral home for many indigenous peoples, including groups whose names have been lost to time, colonization, displacement, migration, and settlement. Within the last 500 years that we know of, that includes the Lipan Apache, the Mescalero Apache, Kiowa, Kickapoo, Comanche, Seminole, and Coahuiltecan. Indigenous peoples have been painting pictographs in this place on the walls of these canyons for at least 6,000 years. And now with your rock art eyes, we have this big timeline here, and you can see from the middle Holocene through the archaic up until the historic, people have been painting pictographs here. But look over to the left, and you can see a very incredible mural. This is the White Shaman mural. Janelle, when I met you earlier, this is the site that you'll be visiting next weekend, as you said. And it is just an incredible composition that that you will learn so much about over the course of a little bit this presentation and so many other presentations that you can view, or the book, The White Shaman Mural by Carolyn Boyd. These sites are an immense first-hand record, written record, in the Lower Pecos Canyonlands. The murals were painted intentionally to be seen and read. So they were written to communicate knowledge and beliefs, to record histories and truths, and to share them not only in place and with the people within the communities that they were actively in, but in time. So rather than just a song or a story or a poem that you share with the people in your immediate community in that immediate moment, these paintings were put here so that they would be shared even beyond that, to now even our community, for example. Shumla's research has focused primarily on the Pecos River style. So I'm going to talk mostly about that style today, but we have other, like I keep saying, we have lots of other presentations and you can learn about the other styles as well. For the Pecos River style, there are nearly, possibly more than 400 sites that we know of. This is just a dot map of about 100 of them that we have located and been studying. Some of them are relatively small. If you look at the size of the panel that is above the heads of all these folks, the painting here is kind of within this area. You can see a large deer, but there's paint behind it as well. So this is a relatively small site. Some are monumentally large, like this site at Rattlesnake Canyon. The paint extends the entire back wall of this rock shelter, and it is 105 meters wide. It's a really, really big site. Through the Hearthstone Project and the research, this was recently conducted between 2021 and 2024 by Drs. Karen Steelman, Carolyn Boyd, and Phil Daring. Karen with us at Shumla and Carolyn and Phil with Texas State, so a collaborative project. We determined that the Pecos River style specifically has been painted for a continuous 4,000, probably more than 4,000 years. So we have sites as young as AD 600, so about 1,400 years old, and we have other sites in the very same style as old as 5,500 years old. So I've shown this on a timeline that includes kind of world history events because it makes it a little bit more familiar to know kind of where these times are falling in these lessons that we like to give through the Lunch and Learns. Our oldest mural, yet dated, was being painted at the same time that the first writing was being developed in Mesopotamia, before the pyramids, 3,000 years before Rome was, at its height. The people of the Lower Pecos were returning to this place and they were producing this style of art as a community on the canyon walls in Texas and Mexico. Across this immense time period, we know that this is the same style because it follows the same rules. This little instrument here is called a dynalite microscope. It was invented by, I think, by dermatologists to look at moles and things on your skin. Well, you know that you can't take a rock art panel off of a wall and put it under a microscope in a laboratory. Or you could, but it would be horribly unethical. So instead, we take the microscope to the rock art site. And here, when we take these images using this dynalite microscope, we can see where the paint has been layered one on top of each other in terms of color and different layers and patterns. And what we've determined at every site that we have studied is that all the black paint was painted first, then all the red, then all the yellow, and finally all the white, always in that succession. So what this means, and looking again at the amazing white shaman mural, I'm going to focus in on this figure that you can barely see in the mural here, into a rendering that Dr. Carolyn Boyd did, so that we can see this paint layering, what that really means. If you were painting just this section of the mural in this way, it would look like this. You would have to start with all the black, knowing exactly where that elbow adornment was going to be painted, exactly where those dots needed to be so that crenellation was perfect. Then you paint your red, then your yellow, and finally your white. So now if we go backwards, and let's, for example, look at this dot right here. You have the black underneath, the red on top of that, and then the yellow on top of the red, and on top of the yellow is the white. So all of these murals are painted within one another in a way that is matrixed, such that we can tell that they were full compositions scientifically, and not that they were random, or one figure might have been painted, 1,000 years ago and another 500 years ago, or something like that. So what does this mean for the larger scale? For the entire mural of the White Shaman, for example, if I erase the paint and then we have it digitally repainted in the way that it was painted by the original artists, this is what that would have looked like. Dots like constellations everywhere. Then slowly filling in just that red. Then filling in all the places you had left space specifically for yellow. And again, all the places you had left specifically for white. Very intentional, very difficult to do. Are any of y'all artists? I don't think very many people would probably paint in this way. They certainly there's certainly layering, watercolor, I think you start with light and go dark, and acrylic you go dark and go light, or all these different things. But it would be very, very difficult to paint one color at each time and not go back and not have the opportunity to change that. So this is true of White Shaman mural, as you saw. And White Shaman is kind of one of our smaller murals in the end. It's about 32 feet wide. But it is also true of our monumental murals. This was part of our Hearthstone research. This is Panther Cave mural in Seminole Canyon State Park. And the paint extends. This is maybe half of the mural that I'm showing here. Pretty exceptional amount of effort, amount of paint to be created. I mean, it would have taken a community and a lot of thought and planning to create something this complex. Pecos River style is highly patterned across the 4,000 years. We see the same patterns over and over again. So for example, at Fate Bell Shelter in Seminole Canyon, you can see this figure here in the back. The head is here. The body is long here. The wings, this one has wings. And the hands, instead of the arms outstretched, hands coming from the shoulders. So I'll show you a black and white drawing to kind of see it a little bit easier. So look at the attributes that you're seeing here on this specific figure within a mural of many figures. We have, like I said, the face, the head with a mask. We have kind of panther or looking ears, antlers, stub wings, and larger wings, a center style on the body, hands kind of coming up from the shoulders, and what we call single pole ladders, a clear motif across the bottom of these wings and on this shoulder here. So if we continue to look across the landscape, this is also in Fate Bell Shelter, which is a giant shelter, but in a completely different place. We see on the left side and close to true color, and the right side through a de-stretch filter, again, the same head and a mask, but this mask is white. We see the hands coming from the shoulders. We see the wings outstretched. We see a center style, but this time the center style is white rather than black. We see antler tines, and we see single pole ladders. This is clearly a similar or the same figure, but maybe at a different time in the story or the life of that figure, or depicting different things as important, many reasons, and it even looks like a different person's painted hand, perhaps. in a completely different site, in a completely different canyon, miles and miles away. Again, here in regular color on the left and through D-stretch on the right, we have the head with the mask. This time the mask is black, and again, the center style is black. We have the stub wings, but we do not have the larger wings. We have the antlers. This time we have a mouth pointed up with teeth and dots that are symbolizing what we call speech breath. Dots and lines coming in and going out of the mouths of figures is depicting the power of speech and breath. But we still have the single pole ladders. You would not say that this is a fully different figure, but maybe this is a figure in a different activity or at a different time again in the story. Finally, another site we visited, this one's far from those two. We saw paint here. We did our usual work to make sure that we were documenting the site. When we took it back to the lab and applied the D-stretch, look who showed up. The same figure. Now, the bottom of the figure has been obscured, but because we're seeing the same patterns over and over again across the landscape, we can recognize at least what looks like a very similar figure with the mask, with the same panther-like ears, with the antlers, with the hands coming from the shoulders. And we could anticipate that if we continued looking around that site, we might find single pole ladders or other things that direct us in this way. So this is a way to show that patterns and attributes were how the murals were read in the past, and they're how we can learn about them today. And you do this, we do this all the time. We read everything through patterns and attributes. We read images every single day. Who is this? Little Red Riding Hood, right. And why do you know? Because of the red cape and the wolf. But the thing that is so silly that we don't ever think about is that you know who she is, you know where she's going, you know why she's going there. Her grandmother is sick. You know what's in that basket. You know why there's a wolf in the picture. You know that when she gets to her grandmother's house, this wolf will have eaten her grandmother, have put on her clothes, be in her bed, and you even know the conversation they're going to have. My, what big eyes you have. The better to see you with. You know the entire story. And if you saw a picture of a wolf in a grandmother's clothing in a bed and Little Red Riding Hood wasn't even in the picture, you would still know that was a part of that story. So what about this one? Is that Little Red again? Just wearing the same hood? No. This is Hansel and Gretel. And why do we know? She's got the same hood on because you know the story. There's a house that looks like candy. It's the young boy and the girl. They're connected. They're together. They're facing this place. We know just based on the attributes that this is a completely different story. And I want to make absolutely sure that you understand that I am not in any way connecting the paintings of the Lower Pecos rock art and the meanings of them to our fairy tales. The only thing I want to show here is just how much we forget, that we hold in our minds, that we associate with pictures, and we immediately know exactly what's happening. And so when we see that figure that has the mouth up and the speech breath coming, someone who knew that myth and understood that story would know what they would probably even hear in their minds what was being said. And so we have to remember to take ourselves out of our knowledge and realize that their knowledge included so much of exactly what we just experienced. These patterns and attributes were discovered by Dr. Carolyn Boyd, Shumla's founder, to really have striking parallels to the creation and solar myths, specifically of two groups that speak Uto-Aztecan languages. These are the Aztec, or Nahua, both present day and from the past, as well as the Huichol, or Huixarica. And through the process of studying these different peoples and not studying the peoples, studying the rock art in comparison to the myths and beliefs of the peoples, one of the things that Carolyn was able to do through the Hearthstone Project was to actually go to Mexico and meet with Huichol people. And they are able to read these murals the way that you just read those pictures of Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel. When they were shown these pictures and they live hundreds of miles away and have never seen these murals, they could immediately recognize what they were looking at and point out the stories and the understandings that they had surrounding them. It's a really incredible opportunity that surprised them a lot too. You know, how did these people arrive in their village and have their stories depicted? It's pretty incredible. Here, Maraakame Raphael said about this part of the White Shaman mural, "This is when the sun was born, and this is the path of the sun, for it is ancient." Carolyn and her colleagues are in the process right now of writing up a lot of this research that she did with the Huichol and working on more interpretive work for the rock art. So stay tuned for that because it will be very exciting. But not only the people themselves who practice these myths, but also the people like the late, unfortunately, Dr. Alfredo Lopez Austin, who have spent their lifetime studying Mesoamerican art and Mesoamerican belief systems. When they were shown and have now studied these sites, are absolutely blown away that they depict thousands of years before the ancient Aztec that we know and the Maya that we have studied through the civilizations and things, that this archaic core of belief that went, continued probably from the migration into North America and through the archaic is depicted in the Lower Pecos and can shed so much light on later cultures and the migrations and lifeways of different peoples. So this, for example, is a 500-year-old Aztec codex. Codex is a word that they often use to describe a book or manuscript that is from Mesoamerica. And this is a 5,500-year-old codex. Just because it's not written on paper doesn't mean it is not a composition that was intended to communicate these important stories. And this is why we say these murals are books. It really helps us to explain to people who may have preconceived notions about the word rock art, that what we're talking about here is truly a library of information. It's very exciting to everyone who is studying this. This is Dr. Julio Amador Beck, who I think signed up for my Lunch and Learn, so he might be here. But I love this slide because he is showing the surprise that we all have been feeling over the course of the last, 10, 20 years as this has been coming to light. Just like this on the right is a library of ancient books, so is this. So if we go back to my beginning slide and we focus not now on the word books, but on preserving. Why is our mission preserving these books? And again, if we go back to this small kind of sliver of Panther Cave, you can begin to see some of the ways that these sites are endangered. If you look here at this zoomorph, it's a deer figure. You can see that it's covered up by an accretion, probably brought by seepage, and will eventually, these things will spall off and disappear. You can also see a large spall, for example, that has come off of the limestone wall in the center of this figure. If you look at these little dots all around the mural here, these are insects that build mud homes, basically, with these holes in the wall and mud homes on them. And when those homes get too heavy, they fall off the wall and they take with them a layer of the limestone that unfortunately has the rock art on it. So there's a lot of things that are degrading these sites. Many of the sites that we approach look more like I've been showing you some beautiful, beautiful, really strongly colored paint. But many of the sites look more like this. So covered in accretion That vibrant color is still there because mineral pigments were used, and that mineral pigment does not dull. But as you can see, there are a lot of places, and if you really look around here, this is a figure of with a crenellation along the top, and this is infilled in black paint here. There's a line here that's infilled in red, and it goes all the way down in black and red, but you can see where microspalling, little tiny pieces of that paint and that limestone are coming off so much that we can really barely see the center of this image. And the same is true over here. You can see where these different accretions are coming down in seepage along the limestone wall in the back. In this next image, you can see a huge spall, a thick layer of limestone broke off this site. And so we really can't tell what the full story was here. We see a beautiful kind of wavy line going all the way across. We see human or anthropomorphic figures across this line. We see some black paint here, a circle here. There are many things that we can tease out of this image, but we will never get back whatever was painted in that space. Time is affecting these sites. Water erosion through limestone is kind of our biggest issue, really, because that limestone is so porous. When it rains, that water comes right out and it just takes off little pieces. It's how the rock shelters were developed. So wind erosion, picking up sand and things and kind of pushing it against the rock art, animals rubbing against the rock art, birds and insects, as you saw, building nests and things on the rock art, plants growing through cracks. And then, of course, humans, we have places where rock art has been used as target practice for shooting guns, or people put their names, on things, or just don't know, not even meanly, just don't understand the importance of these books. So it might seem a little funny that water would be a big problem in such an arid landscape as ours. This is the Shumla campus, just 5 miles west of the Pecos, and this is a perfectly dry canyon, 99% of the time. But if it rains anywhere in our watershed, we can have these kinds of flash floods, even when our skies are blue. And they are very, very drastic and aggressive when these floods come through. They carry a lot of silt and gravel and all sorts of different things. In the 1960s, in 1969, the Rio Grande River, that is right here, was dammed just west of Del Rio, right at the mouth of the Devil's River, which is here. And that created the Amistad Reservoir, which inundated many, many, many archaeological sites. And it also changed the water dynamics of the whole region. So those flash floods, when they're pouring down those canyons, have nowhere to go once they hit the standing water. And that leads to siltation in the canyons that is just building up the bases of those canyons. Like here at Panther Cave, you can see. So remember, Rattlesnake Canyon, we saw before, one of our largest and most monumental sites. This site is painted in this shelter right here. And this is that same shelter underwater, because that canyon is right at the mouth of the Rio Grande. And when water backs up from that Amistad Reservoir and it leaves that silt in that canyon, every time it floods, it is increasing the height of the water on that panel. So here is our friend from Texas Tech University, who is Robert Stubblefield, showing in, I think this picture was taken in 2012, where that water line was when he was there. And that was almost 13 years ago now, and it has risen. But the good news is that Shumla, for the next few years, is going to be focused on this site and fully documenting this site with every arsenal, every tool we have, to make sure that this site is preserved for study and for education for generations to come after it's gone. So that is why we need to preserve. The way that Shumla preserves is through the 4 pillars that you see here: documentation of these sites, research, stewardship, and education. Our documentation involves, and this is us actually at Rattlesnake Canyon, mapping, imaging to a very high quality, 2D high resolution gigapan images, as well as 3D modeling. We do so many different things in order to do that documentation. Our biggest documentation project that Shumla has undertaken was what we called our Alexandria project from 2017 to 2020. And we named it Alexandria because we were not going to let our Alexandria library disappear. And we wanted to get to as many sites as possible in 4 years and get them documented, get them basically digitized. So here is the team when we were documenting our 38th site on a day about as cold as today. Here, I don't know where all of you are, but Texas is very cold today. And here at our 225th site, we preserved through the Alexandria Project digitally 235 sites. And we continue to build on that with what we call baseline documentation. So every year we go to ones that we have not yet documented or that we've recently received access to. And we aim to reach 3 to 10 each year to continue to add to this archive. Our research is really what we've been talking about the first sort of half of this Lunch and Learn, about what we've learned about the rules that were followed in order to create these murals, and the radiocarbon dating that Dr. Karen Steelman has been doing to find out what our chronology is behind all of these motifs, how they changed, and what that means for the archaic core of belief that really has impacted all of the Americas. This is Karen with her plasma oxidation system, which you can learn a lot more about in other presentations. She talks about how it works, but this is how we radiocarbon date rock art with just the tiniest paint sample that's usually already falling off the wall. Stewardship is such an important part of what we do because most of these sites are privately owned, and we work really closely with the landowners to bring them along with us when we are, finding these sites and learning about these sites, and help them want to become conservators with us in this library and build that pride of what it is that they own on their property. And it is just a wonderful relationship that we really appreciate. And this is a picture of us at our Rancher Steward barbecue that we do once a year. We bring all the landowners and the agencies, including the Border Patrol and the Texas Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service, and as many people who, anyone who comes in contact with these sites or is caring for them, stewarding them, so that we can share knowledge and build that community. Our favorite thing is taking multi-generational families to the sites on their property and having them get as excited as we get about the rock art on their own land, because that really makes them protectors. And that's what we need, because we can't be in every canyon every day. But they can learn about how to keep animals away, keep those plants from coming, and if they have a hunting lease, tell hunters about why they should respect these sites, and all those different things that make a huge impact. And finally, education, which is what we're doing today. Just sharing with the people who will be able to help us in the future to continue this preservation work. With students, here you can see learning to do mapping, and actually the students at Comstock ISD built the 10-chamber plasma oxidation system through a National Science Foundation grant, and it is the only one in the world. Tiny border town doing something so unique. We offer competitive internships. We have usually 3 to 5 per year, and they come and stay with us for at least 10 weeks and really dig in and become a part of our team. We do field schools, museum partnerships. Like Janelle was saying, she had just gone to the Whitty. We worked with the Whitty to develop their rock art projection. And this is in San Antonio, for those of you who've never heard of the Whitty Museum. We also did a partnership with the Houston Museum of Natural Science recently, and Halo Shelter is projected there. And of course, we have all of our various ways that you can reach us through our website at shumla.org, through our publications and presentations. We put everything online so that you can access it. And we hope to draw people into the study of this rock art, and really engage people in caring about it and learning more about it. We have now so much data that we have gathered. We're working tirelessly to curate that data and to make it accessible. And we really think that this will be, kind of a new frontier of discovery and understanding of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. You can see our presentations on our YouTube channel. You can sign up for our e-newsletter. I write the e-newsletter once a month, and it is specifically about what's going on with us and what you can be involved in. So if you're not signed up yet, go to our website and scroll all the way down, and you can sign up. And next Lunch and Learn will be Dr. Karen Steelman, March 19th, and she will be talking about what we're about to do at Rattlesnake Canyon. She's going to specifically talk about Shumla's level 2 and level 3 documentation methods. So our Alexandria project was level 1. It was get in, get out. Get in, get those high resolution images and move on so that we could get as many in the archive as possible. Level 2 and 3 really digs in further to gathering that deeper information at those places that are going to be imminently lost, probably within our lifetime, to make sure that we have as much information as possible. So I'm so excited that I actually did that in 40 minutes, because that means that I get to open it up for questions. I'm going to take it off screen sharing. And if you have put a question in the chat, I'm going to look at the chat super quick, and I'll answer those first, and then we can have people come off mute and ask actual questions. I mean, verbal questions. So wonderful to see so many new people. Thank you guys so much for telling us who you are. All right, I have a question here from Troy. Have you been able to date the various color layers of a single image to determine whether the painting was done over a short period or a long period of time? That's a really good question, and no one's ever asked me that before. We have not, that I know of, but I will check with Karen and she can correct me at the next Lunch and Learn if I am wrong. I do not believe that we have dated the same or a different color within the same figure just yet. We're very careful about how much paint we take, but I could be wrong. So I'm going to let Karen answer that question. The one thing about that, though, is that if a time period is too close, radiocarbon dating is not going to show it. So if they painted even within the same year, we believe that these paintings were done, planned for many years. I didn't even show you the different solar and lunar and stellar alignments that many of them have, and different places on the rock wall where they would have had to mark to make sure that certain motifs were in the right places. Many years to plan, and then relatively quickly to produce. And if that is true, then the radiocarbon date from different colors within the same figure would not show a different date. But I'm gonna talk to Karen about that one. And if I have gotten any of that wrong, I will have her correct me in March. Has any connection been speculated between the peoples who created the Pecos River murals and the Chaco culture, or other later appearing groups, or even those who lived at Galt site, perhaps contemporaneously? Thank you, Sarah. That's also a great question. There definitely was connection across the landscape, trade routes, communication. We have not yet studied in depth what those connections might be in terms of motifs in different kinds of art. That is ripe for the study. And we really are anxious for someone and many people to study what those connections might have been, and what we might learn from those art styles and the way that they are connected. The Galt site was, as far as I remember, actually they may have had an archaic component, and I really shouldn't talk about the Galt site specifically myself, but that's in Central Texas for those of you who don't know, and it's a archaeological site where they have found really strong pre-Clovis evidence. So evidence of people living in Texas as far back as 14,000 years. And that really is an interesting thing to think about, that our oldest radiocarbon date on the rock art is 5,500 years. So clearly we didn't radiocarbon date the first. So even if we extrapolate back, say 500 years, people were living in this area, both from the symbols or the information we've gained from Galt, but also excavations in the Lower Pecos for thousands of years before that. Was there rock art there that we just can't see anymore? Or did something happen in the culture at that time that caused all of the song and poetry and music and things to shift, or not stop, but shift to a more permanent way of storytelling involved in just like rock art? So many questions. You're asking wonderful questions. Who of you wants to be a scientist to study these questions with us? Yes, Margot, this recording of our Lunch and Learn will be available. Currently, the only Lunch and Learn that we've recorded that isn't yet available is when Carolyn Boyd talked about her interpretive work from Hearthstone Project, because she's currently publishing it, but that will be available shortly. We recorded it, we're just waiting to release it until that publication comes out. I am most impressed that you involve elders. Absolutely. We are so interested and engaged with involving Indigenous knowledge in the work that we're doing. And to be clear, Shumla is not doing interpretive work. Shumla's work is the preservation work. But Carolyn Boyd, who founded Shumla in 1998, is now an endowed professor at Texas State University. And her interpretive work really helps us to make sure that our preservation work is focused in the right way. And so though Shumla is not conducting interpretive work, Carolyn is, and her work is involving Indigenous consultation to a large degree. What is the status of similar rock art in Mexico? Excellent question, Frank. So there is another half of our library on the other side of the Rio Grande, and we are desperate to document it and include it in our archive. And it's something that we are working toward, but it's not easy. It's a whole nother nation with a whole nother set of rules in a place that is very remote and not terribly safe currently. So we are very anxious to get there and to get that documented and to get that archived with our stuff, because our library is not complete until that's included. In the Huichol region now, so the people who are called the Huichol currently moved into the mountains, and again, I am not qualified to speak about the full ethnography of these peoples, but they, moving away from Spanish, enslavement and different things, they are in a place now where there is not a lot of rock art currently that I'm aware of. I think that there'll be a lot more information about that coming out from Carolyn's research about if there are, rock art between here and where they live now, and the different things that those motifs that may be depicted in other ways that I am not familiar with. Curious if any connections have been drawn yet with the paintings discovered in the Amazon. Similar figures, theme, story, same answer as before with Chaco. I mean, we don't put it past the indigenous peoples of the Americas to have traveled far and wide and been communicating far and wide. And nothing truly, honestly, would surprise me anymore. But I do not know that there are any immediate connections in terms of age or motif that I can speak to. At Galt, they told us carbon dating was problematic due to the limestone. Oh, interesting. So we are very careful in our radiocarbon dating, and Karen can speak to this, and I think she has in a former Lunch and Learns, about removing all limestone from the actual paint sample. And she does a bunch of different washes and different things. She does also background dating. So she will actually take a piece of the limestone and date it separately so that we can confirm that the dates that we're receiving and the dates of the backgrounds are distinct. So there's a lot of different steps that she goes through to make sure that that the paint is truly dated. Another thing that is very important is that when we date these murals, we date the places where the mural, like I showed you at the very beginning, is painted within itself by color and by the way that the lines are overlapping. So that then if we take 8 samples, tiny samples of paint that are, coming off the wall, and we date them all, and then they all perfectly line up in the same time, we can feel really confident that that is a correct date for that paint. And we also, I say we, I do not, Karen also dates the oxalates that grew on the limestone before the paint was added and the oxalates that grew on the paint. And by doing that, she can bracket the dates of the paint. So we feel even more secure that these are truly the right radiocarbon dates for the activity of painting these. Has there been any effort to correlate the stories in your art with those of Far East Asia? Not that I know of, but again, ripe for the study. Is there any evidence that indicate whether these stories traveled from the north down to the south or vice versa? That would clarify why the Huichol peoples understood the story depicted on a white shaman mural. It's a really, really good question. And again, it's something that we're working to understand. We can't, correlation, causation, that whole discussion. We can't say because it appears that this is older and they understand it, so it would have been this direction of migration, that it had to have been that way. There is a possibility that, someone could have come down here and then gone back up and painted and come back. So we can't currently prove a direct migration with no back and forth or a very specific linear pattern. But it is something that we can continue to study. And I think that there is a lot to learn based on all the various, the rock art that is remnant today and all the different parts of the Americas, looking at those correlations and aligning them with chronologies really could blow our understanding of the migratory history of the Americas wide open. How do we promote the safekeeping of the rock art murals? Linda, I love you, and I love this question. The biggest way is to support Shumla. We spend our whole day, every day, as a team of currently 8, as we're growing, promoting the safekeeping of the rock art murals. Share this knowledge with your friends, with other people. It's so much fun to blow people's minds at a dinner party by saying we have some of the most extraordinary ancient art in the world right here in Texas. And if you would like to support the work that we're doing, you can donate on our website, shumla.org. We're a 501c3, so every gift is tax deductible and goes right into our programming to continue the work that you saw throughout this Lunch and Learn. So thank you for that question. Do we have any other questions? We have about 9 minutes. Would anyone like to come off mute? And Margot says, I think that James' question may have been based on Athabascan people crossing over the Bering Strait from Siberia. Yeah, there's so much. There's so much to learn. I mean, even the language families, the Utah-Aztecan language family, the Athabascan language family, and the groups that then now, the ones that I named before, the Kiowa, the Comanche, the Apache, who many of whom were moved into this region, but then they themselves created rock art. And many of the same places, there's just so much to learn. Mark says, one of the reasons I continue to support Shumla Monthly is because I've seen some of these in the wild. And even after reading Carolyn's books, I'm fascinated and just want to see this history preserved. Thank you, Mark. Yes, ditto. Yes, so much more to learn. And this archive that we're building is how people are going to be able to learn these things. These sites are so remote and they are privately owned. And so this archive, and they're disappearing. So this archive is how researchers and educators all over the world for hundreds of years to come are going to unravel these very questions. So yes. Janelle, are any of the current political changes in the US negatively impacting your funding? We are, and then are you privately funded? So we are funded primarily through individual donations and foundations who give to the types of things that we're doing, historic preservation, conservation. And we have been working with federal grants, as you saw in our Hearthstone project, for example, we achieved a National Endowment for the Humanities grant and a National Science Foundation grant. Fortunately, we are not reliant in this moment on those grants. We had just completed those. So our immediate funding strategy is going to be focused, you know, in those safer areas of individuals like yourselves and private foundations. So I hope that answered that question. Erin, you mentioned a book on the white shaman. Are there other books on the research that you're doing that you would recommend? So the book on the white shaman is the kind of pièce de résistance thus far in terms of interpretive work. For Shumla, because so much of what we do is this day-to-day preservation, most of our publications are articles. And I know that's difficult because that doesn't really get to mainstream public. And so we try to take what we put in those articles and then present them in venues like this. Thus far, we haven't written any books. It is certainly something we would love to do. Carolyn is continuing her work on her writing, and both she and Carolyn and Phil for the Hearthstone Project are working on, I think I'm allowed to say this, an article they are submitting in the next week or two to Science Magazine. And our hope is that it will be accepted by Science Magazine, and that if it is, that it will be picked up in a more public media way that will draw attention to what we're doing and hopefully result in funding and allow us to continue this effort of getting the word out and hopefully writing other books. And but one that is really good that I would suggest is this one, The Rock Art of Texas Indians. It is the paintings of Forrest Kirkland. And Forrest Kirkland was a watercolor artist in the 30s who came to the Lower Pecos and watercolor painted many of these sites. And so it is a really, we take one of these every single time we go in the field because it is a really important, you know, early archive of what these sites looked like when he was here. And so I would recommend, I don't know if they sell it on Amazon, but it's edited by Newcomb. So you might type in NEWCOMB and the Rock Art of Texas Indians. That's another good one. And then of course, White Shaman. And then since we're on the subject of books, okay, so this is of course the White Shaman mural by Carolyn Boyd. And then there's a new book out on another person's watercolors, Mary Virginia Carson. This one is written by Maurice McDermott from the Woody Museum. She also came, this time she came in the 20s and watercolor painted the rock art of the Lower Pecos. So these are some good books for looking at the images and, you know, stay tuned for more scientific work. We're really trying to build a scientific or a, you know, scientific community around this rock art to continue the studies and just learn and learn. Um, how are your articles accessed? Yeah. Some of them, I'm going to have Karen and her Lunch and Learn talk about this. Sometimes they're only accessible to scientists or other, students or researchers. Some of them are open source. The best way to access our articles is to go to our website. We have a publications page under research, and everything that we've ever written is there. Another thing I want you to think about too is that we put everything we do online, but we're constantly learning. So if you're reading something we wrote in 2000, it's not the most recent data. We leave it out there because, everything's a process. But if you're really looking to kind of get the most recent, then focus on the dates that are most recent. Consider a TikTok channel. Okay. Oh, that's just one more thing to do. Michael asked, how many books were drowned by Amistad? It is really hard to say. At that time, archaeologists did not understand the value of these sites. Certainly the people who were making the decisions about creating that reservoir didn't. It seemed at that time that there was just so much of it that, what did it hurt if they were underwater? They did not believe we'd ever understand them. They did not think that they were, really that complex. They kind of thought they were more random, maybe done during leisure time, which we can definitely say was not the case. This is not a leisurely activity in any way. This takes a lot of work and sacrifice. But it's hard for us to know how many. That was the confluence. That was the place where the rivers met. And so it is likely that many, many were lost. What were the most prominent painters? What tribe? We don't know what they called themselves. And it's far enough back in history that we can't really associate them. When I say that we're talking to the Huichol speak a similar language, and they have a similar belief system where they can recognize, like Hansel and Gretel, I think maybe was initially a German story, but I recognize it because I was taught it. So, I'm not saying I wrote Hansel and Gretel, or my people did. It's just that I recognize it because I was taught it. So we're definitely not saying that the people were Huichol specifically, but they are far closer related in language and genetics than other groups. So I don't know how to answer that question yet. And we may never know what, exactly that DNA collection was and what they called themselves, but Uto-Aztecan language speakers is about as far as we can go. Life of Rocks by Judy T says, look up Life of Rocks by Catherine Wells. Okay, I will. I don't have that one. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If anybody, who's new or anybody has a question they'd like to ask, we'll probably stop the video recording, but I can stay on for some minutes if anyone would like to ask any further questions. And thank you so much for joining us today. It was just really fun to share this with you.